والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you and thank you for your time and for attending the first professorial talk this semester, which is a continuation, of course, from the series of professorial talk that comes as one of the college's great initiatives. And of course, I'm happy that you are here, and I'm happy to moderate, of course, particularly this session that will be, inshallah, that will bless inshallah, the future sessions with the presence of Dr. Ibrahim Zein. طبعا Dr. Ibrahim Zein, يعني, as we say, غني عن التعريف. We don't give him an introduction because he is our wise man of the college, and he's our أستاذ, professor and scholar, and we all learn from him, mashallah, and I'm sure that we will learn from today's very interesting topic, which is the encounter between Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab and an unknown monk, as reflected in, and correct me if I'm wrong, one of the documents out of 13 folios that were kept or preserved in Ambrosian Library in Milan. I think this is very interesting. It comes also as a continuation of the project that Dr. Zein and Mr. Ahmed al-Wakil have been working on for years, and this project has produced multiple products and fruits, book chapters. It has produced whole book, and journal articles. And I think this is very important and interesting in the way that it will add or attest to the authentication, or add to the authentication of the covenants of the Prophet, and to always reflect on the implications of these documents in terms of the Muslim long tradition of acceptance, pluralism, coexistence with other non-Muslim communities. I'm not going to talk further, and once again, it gives me really an honor and great pleasure to ask Dr. Zein to take the floor.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Allow me at the beginning to thank my dear brother and friend, Professor Ahmad Shahi, the former Dean of the College of Islamic Studies. Actually, he's the one who brought me here. And he is the one actually who helped us, Ahmed al-Wakil and myself, and I, to work on this project. And he was very supportive for the last 5 years or so. And he was the one actually who was directing us from time to time and helping us financially, as well as giving personal advice from time to time also. And making this project part and parcel of the digital Sira project, which the college actually had it as one of its main initiatives as well. I take this opportunity, I guess, to thank him for all the support, and he was always for us. And also I take this opportunity to thank my dear friend and colleague Ahmed al-Wakil for coming today, I guess. And of course, I have my colleagues here. I identify first and foremost our good brother, and generous friend, Dr. Luay Safi, and my friend here, Dr. Muhammad al-Jamal, and my good colleague over there, Dr. Alex, students as well. Of course, I mean, Sabika and Fida, they are very important. I mean, people behind all the good things happening, I guess, in CIS. Now, as I said to you at the beginning, this was part of the Covenant of the Prophet project, and the discovery of this manuscript actually was done by Ahmed al-Wakil, it's not me. It happened accidentally when we went to the Vatican to give our first presentation. We were, led by Professor Ahmad Shahid as well. Professor Ahmad and I actually went back to Doha, and Ahmed insisted that he would like to go around, check on the libraries, in the Vatican and in Milan and elsewhere, and collect some materials as usual. And he accidentally actually found this very important manuscript in Milan. And he was very excited when he found it and sent it to a copy to me, and then we continued working on it until it was published in Muslim-Christian Relations, the recent issue of the journal. I have a problem. I cannot, my computer is not connected. It's connected here. Oh, okay, that's the oh, yeah. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. As you can tell from thank you. Appreciate that. Take this one. This one? Thank you. So, as an introduction, the manuscript which was found by Ahmed al-Wakil, this is the citation of the manuscript. It's part of an anthology of various Arabic writings located there in the library. This is the number of folios that we were working with. All right, this way I'll see that. Now, as you can tell, this is the first folio. Yeah, that's right. It's semi-Kufi. And this one on the right is the last folio. On the left, the first folio of the manuscript, and on my right, the last folio of the manuscript. As you can tell, the manuscript itself is not completed. There is part which was lost. It started with Al-Lisan, Mada Yastalfani. And of course, there were some folios which were missing. And I think this was collected perhaps by those who were involved in the crusade. And they've taken all, of course, they confiscated most of the manuscripts in Greater Syria and perhaps inside the Iberian Peninsula as well. And they took them back to Italy. Well, this is just a wild guess of how this actually was located in that place. It doesn't seem that those people actually were careful enough to collect all the manuscript. So the missing part, God knows, how it starts, it's not clear. But the existing part actually is a meaningful discourse and text on the Christian-Muslim relations from somebody we're not so sure whether he's a Christian or a Muslim. We will discuss this shortly, inshallah. Now, so this is the first folio, existing folio, but obviously it's not the first folio of the manuscript itself. Now, the last one, as you can tell, ends with this very interesting, formula. وهذا ما كان من حديثهم والحمد لله رب العالمين رحم الله عظيم من كتب ومن missing من كتب ومن قرأ ومن قال آمين. So it's a very Islamic, formula for ending a text. And we will discuss the details of this in the coming. So we ended up actually writing an article on this, and it was published recently in the Christian-Muslim Relations Journal. For those who are, it's an open access article. For those who are interested, they can get their copy and read. Perhaps I'm not going to discuss all the details that you said. And the most important part is the translation for English speaking. For the translation of the text, we also provided the translation of the text, and we edited as well the Arabic text. Now, what to make out of this at the beginning was the question. I mean, what to make out of this? Our intellectual imagination was focused on the covenants of the Prophet, and perhaps the Sulh agreement and the political documents of early Islam. We were just focused on that. But obviously the text itself, the manuscript itself, there could be so many things in our interpretation of the manuscript. What to make out of it. And obviously we started with this premise that we are going to look at it from a perspective of a life fact. There is something which is historical. Obviously there is something which is trans-historical inside the text, which makes the text very legendary text. And there is part of the text also is reflecting the life, a kind of life situation between Muslims and Christians, reflecting actually something which is beyond historical fact and obviously beyond legendary accounts of any facts. It is rather about the life, which means, if you want to look at it, it does have two elements in it. One element which is descriptive of historical situations and historical facts as well, in addition to the legendary, anecdotal aspect of the manuscript, and part which is evaluative and prescriptive in nature. But those two are being given in one manuscript. So if you are going to read it, you have to be sensitive in reading it by having these two things at once. Now, it was a very difficult type of interpretation, making meaning of a manuscript which is factual, legendary, and at the same time, prescriptive in nature. It does have a prescription for Muslims, for the ideal Muslim leader, like Umar ibn Khattab, and his Christian subjects as well. What are the Christian subjects actually demanding from him, and what he should be seeking from his spiritual Christian subjects as well. And I think the author of this manuscript was a very intelligent man, undoubtedly. He had all these things in his mind. Perhaps we traveled into his mind through his text. He had all these things in his mind, finally to negotiate a text which is very brilliant. Most of us, Ahmed and I, when we were reading it and translating it, it was a very difficult text to read and to understand as well, and to make sense out of it. But we were patient enough, I guess, to spend the time needed to be spent on it, and to make sense out of it within our interest. As I said to you, we might be biased, certainly we were. But at the same time, we gave our own interpretation of the text, and I think it is a kind of a meaningful and worthy to be looked at by scholars and researchers as well. Now, as I said to you, part of it was a craft work, which is editing a manuscript. Part of it was translating the text and making sense out of the text without actually reading in text anything which is not there in the text. And part of the article also was, as I said to you, I mean, our focus, our interest, and our philosophical, perhaps, historiographical stand was presented in the paper. Now, we looked into our materials and we realized that similar texts are there in our books of history depicting this relationship between a monk and a Muslim. And we realized the first one which was given, the first submission which was given by Khattab al-Baghdadi in his book Al-Zuhd wal-Haqa'iq, a short account. And then we also found another text which was given by Ibn Asakir in his book Tarikh Madinah Dimashq. And most of these texts that we found do have some similarities and of course differences, significant differences, with the manuscript that we collected and studied. So the account is an encounter between a monk, always and a monk. That's the strategy. I mean, they never mention the name of the monk, but he is a rahib. And I was asking Ahmed, I mean, why is it so? I mean, there should be Sophronius al-Rahib, it could be better, or Bahamios al-Rahib, it could be better. I mean, but why just al-Rahib? And he has been addressed, Ya Rahib. Why is it so? And one of the funny speculations, I guess, he gave, he was saying, well, you know, in the Quran, we read that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always telling us about the Pharaoh, but not saying Ramses Pharaoh. But it was understood to the audience that this is a very specific Pharaoh who actually reflects or epitomizes all the characteristics of a Pharaoh in him, and no need actually to mention his name. So it might be the case that in Khattab al-Baghdadi and Ibn Asakir, when the Rahib was given his title without giving his name, it might be that specific Rahib would have all the characteristics of an ideal Rahib as well. Now, in the two accounts which were given by Khattab al-Baghdadi and Ibn Asakir, Umar ibn Khattab is missing. It's a Muslim who were doing that with a Rahib. And of course, I mean, in our sources, there was no reference to the covenants of the Prophet as well. And also, Ibn Asakir reports a tale of, I mean, this is what he did. So this is the chain of transmission of his encounter. And the place which this encounter did take place was in China. And Khattab al-Baghdadi reports this on the authority of this very important and famous Zahid, ascetic, Muslim ascetic, Abdul Wahid ibn Zein. And we speculated, perhaps, that the manuscript is the oldest, and we base this on the language of the manuscript, and perhaps also the content in our study. But that is just a speculation that we made when we compared the accounts of Khattab al-Baghdadi and the account of Ibn Asakir. So we might be wrong, okay, whether historically this is the eldest or not among the three documents which we are studying. But we feel that it is, and the conclusion that we reached was based on these two elements, the type of language, the sentences and the phrases, as well as the general content of the text. Now, when we looked at the authorship of the manuscript, first, to be directly, communicated to you is that the author is unknown. Inside the anthology, we have a number of manuscripts, but this specific manuscript, its author is unknown. As I said to you also, the text is not complete. Some folios were missing from the text. And our investigation led us to make this conclusion that he might be an early Muslim ascetic, okay, or a convert from Christianity to Islam, or a Christian who was familiar with Islam, who recognized it as a religion. From the content of the manuscript, any of these assumptions could be true. And you have to keep also in mind that the monks at early Islam, they all categorically actually accepted the Prophet ﷺ as a prophet coming from God, as somebody who's coming with revelation. And even some who studied the ascetic movement in Basra, which led finally to the development of Sufism in Islam, they were saying that actually these ascetics of early Islam, as well as the Sufi movement, actually these were the true, perhaps, the students of Isa alayhi salam. And there was a kind of interaction between them and the monks who were spreading all over the Arabian Peninsula. And of course, they might have a very great impact on these early ascetics in Basra and elsewhere. So there was a kind of an interchange of spiritual knowledge as well as spiritual experience between these early ascetics in Basra and elsewhere and the Muslims as well. So the assumption of these, one of these three assumptions could be correct, representing what is understood from the document itself. Now, also, inside the text, the manuscript makes a reference to the punishment of grave, which shows that the guy who wrote this manuscript, obviously he, well, I'm not saying he or she, but obviously he, it could be, he could be actually also a nun or yeah, could be. I don't have any gender bias here against who's the writer of this. Could be a female also. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, it recognizes that Umar took advice from Ali ibn Abi Talib, karamallahu wajhah, which shows, I guess, a kind of a knowledge of the system of governance in the Khilafah at the time of Umar as well. It's well known in Muslim sources that Umar ibn Khattab was one of his advisors, was Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Ali ibn Abi Talib accompanied him in this journey and this conversation that he had with the unknown monk. And to our surprise, that the author does not quote the Quran or the Bible and does not discuss issues concerning his own Christology. He had this conversation, very long conversation between Umar ibn Khattab and the Rahib and the monk. But within the discussion, no issues concerning the Christology of the author of the manuscript was present. And this is a very intriguing thing. Whatever one of the three assumptions is true, we were expecting that the Christology of the author would be presented in this kind of encounter between a monk and Umar ibn Khattab. But none of it was there in the manuscript. Now, the manuscript itself actually reflects the monastic archives in Greater Syria and the monastery in St. Catherine, monastery in Sinai Peninsula. And it reflects actually a dictionary, a vocabulary of dictionary, which includes a number of phrases which are highly visible there in the covenants of the Prophet, and words as well, and terminologies which are there, which make us actually to conclude that since this kind of vocabulary and this dictionary of these words were there part of the monastic archives, so this guy must have read some of these covenants of the Prophet. In addition to that, he had a direct reference to the covenants of the Prophet in the conversation between Umar ibn Khattab and the monk. So these are the phrases there, as you can see, which when we studied the covenants, these are key phrases in these covenants. And obviously the word sultan also, which was not part of the political vocabulary of early Islam. It is there, I mean, it's a Quranic term as well, but wasn't part of the political vocabulary of early Islam. In the political vocabulary of early Islam, you will have Khalifa, you have Amir al-Mu'mineen, and so forth, or the Amir, or so forth, but not Sultan. Sultan was the making of later development in political terminology of Islam. But this manuscript had that word, which also a very important term being utilized by those who transcribe the covenants of the Prophet and the copies that we are having and we study. And also, Umar was quoted saying this statement, which is there also mirroring some of the vocabulary that we have inside the covenants of the Prophet. So all in all,
Did you say that the Sultan's terminology was in the Prophet?
oh yeah, I mean this terminology was one of the one of the designations of the political authority there in the text of the covenants.
Sheikh Abbas,
Yeah, I mean, it's a later development. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's a later development. It's not part of the vocabulary of early Islam, undoubtedly. I mean, the governors or the rulers of early Islam were given these titles as Khalifa or Amir al-Mu'mineen. These were the titles. Though the word Sultan is there in the, it's a Quranic term. It's not altogether not there in the Islamic vocabulary, but it was not designated as a political terminology in early Islam. So these are some of the anomalies that we realized and studied in understanding the covenants of the Prophet as well. Do I have this? Okay then. All right. Now, okay, yeah, we'll finish it, I guess, on time, so we'll give time for discussion as well. Now, the encounter actually was very friendly, being reflected from the way the Rahib was addressing Amir al-Mu'mineen and the way Amir al-Mu'mineen Umar was addressing the Rahib. So it's a very friendly kind of interaction or encounter. There isn't any kind of hostility being reflected in the manuscript. But Umar will call him Ya Ra'id, and he will call Amir al-Mu'mineen with his political title as well. Now, we all know in our history that Umar had this very important encounter with the Patriarch Sophronius of Jerusalem, with whom actually he concluded a very important treaty in the history of early Islam. And we also know that Umar had an encounter with these dignitaries shown to you on the screen. Now, Umar also, in the pre-Islamic era, Ibn Asakir was telling us, he had this encounter with a monk. The story goes like this, it's just a short summary for those who are not aware of the story, which has been documented by Ibn Asakir when he was giving the history of Umar ibn Khattab before Islam. Which says that Umar ibn Khattab once was going for this trade caravan to Syria, and inside, half of the journey, he realized that he left something in Mecca. So he left the caravan and went back to Mecca to settle the issue, and then tried to catch up with the caravan, but he couldn't. So when he reached Syria, he was abducted by a Roman prefect or soldier maybe. He asked him to do some work for him. So he was taken to a place, and the guy, obviously there was a kind of a communication breakdown between them. Maybe the Roman soldier or prefect was not speaking proper Arabic, maybe he was speaking broken Arabic, and Umar didn't realize what the man wanted from him. And after the end of the day, the Roman guy, he came, and he found Umar hadn't done anything. And he started scolding Umar and perhaps pushing him around. And Umar didn't like the whole thing and then punched him and killed him. And then it was a serious thing. At that time in Damascus, you're killing a prefect or you're killing a Roman soldier. It's a very dangerous thing, I guess, for his own existence. So he left, he decided to flee the place. And then he found himself, after he was completely exhausted, he found himself next to a monastery, and he took nap over there. In the morning, the monk realized that there is somebody outside. So, and he was tired and exhausted and hungry also. He invited him inside and gave him a meal and asked him, what is his problem? And then the monk realized that this guy is going to be the one who will come and take over. This is the prophecy that he made. Come and take over perhaps greater Syria and Jerusalem as well. And he told him, listen, when you are going to be the general who is going to rule greater Syria and Jerusalem, you have to write a covenant for me. And then Umar said, okay. I've no problem with that. And then the guy took his signature, and then Umar gave it to him, and then he gave Umar his mule, and he said to him, everybody know this mule, or perhaps, is it a mule or a donkey? Ahmed. The story.
Yeah, a mule.
Yeah, a mule. He gave him this mule, and then he said to him, on your way back to your home, whenever you come across a monastery, they will feed her back and take care of you, so you don't have to worry about that. Of course, this is what happened until he reached the caravan, going back to Mecca, and then he let go of the mule, and the mule went back to the monk. And it's a very interesting story. And then when Umar came to sign this capitulation treatment with Sophronius, this guy came to him and said, oh Umar, remember that perhaps 30 years ago or so that you signed for this. He said, okay, I don't mind, but now I'm not representing Umar, I'm representing actually the Muslims. If you're going to do certain things to Muslims, I don't mind keeping my word to you. And then I agreed, and he signed for him a covenant. This story is in our literal sources, Ibn Asakir, and I'm pretty sure, it doesn't seem legendary. Obviously, Ibn Asakir has his own chain of transmission, but it shows that Umar had quite a number of encounters with a number of monks, some of them before Islam, and of course, the one which we know after Islam, the greater one is between him and the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Saffronis. We come to the conclusion. I think it's better for you to read the article because there are so many things missing in my presentation, and since it's an open access article, so you read it. If you have any thing to share with us, perhaps we would love to. And if we revisited the same manuscript again, we will acknowledge, I guess, your observations as well. Now, what are we, as I said, you would make of this? We would say that the manuscript represents an evidence that the covenants were known in early centuries of Islam. The second thing is the manuscript depicts the archetypal relationship between an ideal and just Muslim ruler and this Christian subject who were presented in the manuscript. But I also wanted to tell you this, that we have parallelism to this. We have throughout our history during the Umayyad and the Abbasid era as well, and the Ottomans, of course, that you have an ascetic who would come to the ruler and advise him and give him a kind of a spiritual advice. But in this manuscript, the one who is giving the spiritual advice to Umar is not a Muslim. He is a monk, a Christian monk, of course. And finally, the author wanted actually to popularize the number of historical encounters between Umar and monks, which were in our literary sources, and turning it into a legend as well. In the manuscript, obviously, whoever is going to read this, as I said to you, this is a kind of a trans-historical account. Obviously, it can't be a historical account, but a trans-historical account. But it does have a purpose. When you have this kind of meta-historical discourse between historical actors, what is meant actually of doing this is this kind of trans-historical relationship at a mystical level. I mean, at a historical level, obviously, Umar cannot have that kind of conversation with a monk. But at a mystical level, that kind of trans-historical encounter is possible. And that's why at the beginning of this lecture I said, obviously the author, who's unknown to us, is a very intelligent person who popularized an historical accounts into trans-historical account at a mystical level where all these will meet. We are not taking any perennial, I guess, position here. No, not at all. I mean, I'm completely against any kind of perennial understanding of Islamic texts. But I feel that the author must have that in mind when he wrote this very important manuscript. And thank you very much for listening. I can answer some of the questions, and the gentleman over there, Ahmed, is the one who got us into this because he discovered the manuscript, so he had to answer some of the questions as well.
Thank you so much, Professor Zein. It's always fascinating to listen to you and to Mr. Ahmed Al-Wakil discussing these documents and contextualizing them, making them really lively. And I'm sure the audience will have a lot of questions. But it's important, just to give a lively context, a lively meaning to encounters, whether from a factual point of view or, as you said, from a mystical point of view or a legendary point of view. It's always important to discuss these documents and bring them to life. I will now turn the floor to the audience. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. And yes, please, Dr. Alex.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ibrahim and Ahmed, for this wonderful, fascinating presentation. I have a number of questions. The first one is both of you, whether you could say a little bit more about the process by which this manuscript was found. I think it's really a great discovery, and there was some very felicitous intuition that took you to the Ambrosian Library in Milan. Could you say a little bit more about that process and whether are there other libraries in Europe where we can expect to find such gems? That would be my first question, and very interesting for us to know more about the historical process by which you came to identify the manuscript. The second one is, you've presented very nicely some of the ways in which stories similar to this one are found in Muslim historical chronicles. And I was wondering whether there might be some additional work to be done looking at the Arabic, Greek Orthodox milieu where this text was found, and whether there might be, whether you've looked into this or not, whether there's work to do to explore the ways in which maybe in this Christian tradition this text also was used or ignored, and why and how this text might have been used in the Christian milieu in which it was, if not produced, at least copied and preserved. I hope that is clear. I had a third question just about the place of Ali in this story. I know you focus on Umar, but you also mentioned Ali. Could you say something about how he features that? That would be very interesting. Thank you so much.
Well, I mean, there are very important questions, I guess, to ask. The three of them. I think the question number one, obviously, Ahmed is in a better position to answer it because he's the one who discovered the manuscript. So Ahmed, could you answer the first question?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So it was just by pure coincidence, because we left Rome at that time, but we were in Rome together, and then they left. And I thought, oh, that's a good opportunity to go around Italy and look at some libraries. So then I went to Florence, Venice, and the final stop was Milan. And then from Milan, taking the plane, I was going actually to in Belgium. So I just went there in the library, and they have a catalog, obviously. And I was given the catalog, and then they said, can have a look at these different, the different entries in the catalog. And then this big anthology, I was going through the description of it, because it has many different short accounts. And then it had this, it said this, the description of it was there's this encounter between Umar and a monk. So I thought that's quite interesting. And I asked them to bring the anthology, and it was quite big. And then I started flipping through it, and there I found, I was going through that text. And then the phrase, obviously, which is, because we were studying the covenants at that time. And then the phrase, أنا خصمه حجيجه يوم القيامة, that same phrase which is used in the covenants was there in the manuscript. So I thought, okay, this is very interesting, and I was you're not really supposed to do this. I took pictures on my phone, and came back to Doha, and then we examined it together. But by the way, the manuscript now is online, so it's open access, so you can see the whole anthology online. I don't think that was the case at the time. So I don't know if this answers your question. But I think yes. I think probably that there's quite a lot of Arabic texts you do find in, I mean, one went through the Monastery of St. Catherine library, the manuscripts, some of them which are online. So you do have quite a bit of Arabic manuscripts. So it'd be very interesting to know what else monasteries maybe in this region have, which hasn't been studied. Okay, thank you.
Now,
With regard to the issue of whether this was ignored by the Greek Orthodox or not, well, my hunch is no, I don't think it was ignored. But I forgot to say this, that this manuscript was not studied, and it did not appear anywhere except in Milan. But it was also part of an anthology that has different disputations on different issues. But we tried actually our level best to see whether that specific manuscript were copied or paired or actually cross-examined or anything, but we didn't find any. And as I told you, I mean, unfortunately, the manuscript is not complete. We don't know the beginning of the manuscript. Obviously, thanks God, I mean, we know that how it ends. But the folios that we studied, it seems, I mean, it has a story to tell, a complete story. But from the beginning, you can realize that there are things missing before the conversation between Umar and the monk. What we have actually in the folios that we studied, only this counter and this lengthy conversation between Umar and the monk. But the introduction of this was missing, and up until now, actually, we didn't realize where are these folios. As I said to you, I mean, my hunch was that the Crusaders, when they came, one of the things that they did, they confiscated all the documents belonging to the Greek Orthodox churches in Greater Syria and of course in St. Catherine Monastery in Sinai. And you have to keep in mind also this, that the Crusaders wanted actually to find a footing, a place in the Holy Land after this complete separation between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. They cannot represent actually Christianity because they don't have any footing in the Holy Land. So part of the reasons, I guess, for the Crusaders is not against the Muslims who were the custodian of the Holy Land at that time, but I guess the main target, this is what the Greek Orthodox will tell you, the main target were the Greek Orthodox. And that's why they confiscated all their documents and all their relics that took them back to Europe. And of course, this is my hunch, I mean, I might be wrong, that it was part of the collections which were there in Greater Syria and Iberian Peninsula and Sinai Peninsula. And we have also to keep in mind that some of these crusaders were not literate. So they were ordered actually to collect everything. Perhaps in their confiscation of these documents, they were not careful enough. And of course, I mean, most of them didn't know Arabic, so we didn't tell, I mean, which is which. So that was the fate of our documents.
the last question was Zein Ali, briefly, and then we move to
Yeah.
we have now requested for more questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. Now, Ali was there accompanying Umar in this encounter. Of course, he didn't say more than more than one sentence, but all the time was a conversation between Ali and Umar. When he uttered that specific statement, the Rahib noticed that there is somebody accompanying Umar. And he asked about him, and he said that he's Ali ibn Abi Talib. So didn't, he was not engaged in the story, but he was one of the listeners to the conversation. And obviously, I mean, for the person who wrote this manuscript, to bring in Ali along with Umar shows that he knows that this man, Ali, has a very important role to play in governing the empire at that time. I mean, was it Osman, was it Rahman ibn Auf, was it his son, Abdullah ibn Umar, but Ali ibn Abi Talib. It indicates, I mean, obviously if somebody, I mean, that will make our Shia brothers and sisters very happy that they were included in this kind of encounter between this great monk and Umar ibn Khattab.
Yes. It's not exclusive to the Shia.
Yeah, that's right. It's all-inclusive document. Yeah.
Mustafa and then Dr. Ali. Yes.
جزاك الله خير. بارك الله فيك Professor Ibrahim and Dr. Ahmed. You make us now more interest and attention to this problem. In fact, the scholars during the time of the Prophet Ibrahim, and after that, they concentrate on the Quran and on Sunnah, and the fiqh, and so on. But it seems to me now we need to put more effort in order to understand this problem and to do more research and study. So please carry on and give us from time to time what news they are going to have, especially Ahmed. My question in fact about the word Sultan. I think Professor Guy also comment on that. That you said the word Sultan in the Quran, it is there. But I'm not sure whether it is there in the Quran, meaning Khalifa or Amir or ruler.
It's not a title. Not a title.
Yeah.
Functional title.
Yeah. For example,
It's a concept.
it's not, when you read Surah Al-Rahman, يا معشر الإنس والجن إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. This describes some of the author of the Ulama said that it means science, ilm. I wonder if you have any specific verse in the Holy Quran that said the word Sultan comes with the meaning of a ruler or a Khalifa or Amir al-Mu'mineen. Thank you.
Well, the answer is no. I mean, I agree with you. The answer is no. No, it was not part of the political vocabulary of the Quran as well. I mean, Sultan, جعلنا له Sultan, فلا يسرف في القتل, or Sultan al-Nasira, or the ayah that you, I mean, it doesn't have any kind of political implication. I agree with you. But later on, we will have as Professor Wahid said, I mean, in the Abbasid era perhaps, and the Ottoman era, it's a designation for the political leader of the community, of the Muslim community. And also the Sufis were using the word Sultan, isn't it? You have Sultan al-Ashiqin, is it? Yeah, so it's a high Sufi status, which is Sultan al-Ashiqin. But I agree with you, no, it isn't. It isn't part of the vocabulary, the political vocabulary of early Islam. It's only we'll have the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the Khalifa, or the Imam, but not Sultan, not at all. Not at all.
This is supporting which you reach that the word Sultan is strange at that time to the Prophet.
Yeah, it's an anomaly. Yeah, this is an anomaly that we realized. I mean, in studying all these documents that we are having, perhaps because these covenants actually were renewed. From the time of the Prophet, when Abu Bakr came, they were renewed with these communities. I mean, Christian communities and the Jewish communities. When Uthman came, also they were renewed. When Umar came, they were renewed. When even Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan came, we have literal evidence that they were renewed. But the renewal processes obviously would also indicate that the ruling of the political ruler of the time is no longer Amir al-Mu'minin, or no longer the Imam, or no longer a Khalifa. Perhaps it might be the Sultan. That's why these copies adapted the term Sultan instead of the term Amir al-Mu'minin or Khalifa.
Well, thank you for sharing with us this very, very interesting and really insightful document about, as you said, about some facts of the time. I mean, but the time is not really specified. Maybe I'd like to make comment, but before that, I have a question. Have you dated? Is there a way to identify when was this text written?
Yeah. The date is a kind of a rough date, yeah. Ahmad, do you remember the date, is it?
I know you put it on the.
Oh, you don't remember it?
It's.
Yeah, this is.
So, estimated. But based on what estimated? Is it on the writing itself? On the style of writing? Or what?
There was a lady who wrote an article about this anthology, and she compared the various writings in the anthology.
In terms of the style of writing? Right?
Yeah. And she noticed that, obviously it's an estimate, but based on one of the accounts, it was a metropolitan who was complaining about some other metropolitan, something like this. I can't remember now exactly, but these two historical figures lived around that time, and based on that, she estimated this is when that's the date.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly it is an Abbasi document. It's not an early document. Yeah. And so there are a number of indicators that this is not a historical encounter, but an imaginary encounter. Which is, I mean, it has a value, definitely. Not a historical value, but a cultural, and of course, maybe historical value in the sense of giving us some insight into the way of thinking in that particular period. And definitely it provides some positive light about the relationship between Muslims and Christians. So that's very, very important, really, document as such. Now, the Sultan, you're right, the Sultan, in the Quran is used Sultan in the sense of authority, definitely, but not a position of authority, just authority, and not always in political context, although authority need not have political context, depending on the scope of that authority. So this is maybe another thing to say. It is really later documents. Now you said now the page that you showed us at the beginning and the end. The first one, it looks like this is really maybe few pages in the this is the end of the introduction. Is this the first page that you have? Yeah, because it suggests that the author is a Muslim. Because if you look, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, this is not a Christian way of expressing Alhamd, Of course, the Rabb would be used instead of Allah, in this instance. Because Allah would indicate only the Father, not the Trinity. So Rabb really is what they use often. Arab Christians in Syria, they use Rabb, Qala, Rabb. So in the case that the author is most likely, of course, this is not definitive, but it suggests that this is a Muslim who's writing about this encounter, And probably that, I don't know whether that was part of your analysis in terms of significance. I mean, if you could share with us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I agree with you that we postulated the assumptions. You're right. I mean, at the end, the formula that you use shows that the guy might be an early Muslim ascetic. I agree with you. I completely agree with you in this case. But the document also is a very intriguing document because Umar is seeking spiritual guidance from a monk. I mean, the conversation is about that. Umar and Ali, they're coming together, seeking this spiritual guidance from a monk, which is completely, I mean, Muslims will say, no, you're not going to seek any kind of spiritual guidance from somebody who's not a Muslim. And also one of the important things in the conversation, the monk was telling him, I myself, as a monk, yes, we know that there is a covenant between the political leaders of Islam and the Christian community who are living in the midst of the Islamic Empire. But if they are true to Christianity, they shouldn't seek protection from anybody else. They should have actually their protection from God. So he himself is in no need of that covenant, though it is important for the rest of his Christian community. But the monk made it very clear to Umar that, well, he doesn't need a protection from anybody. Since he has this direct line with God, he is the one who's going to protect him from all the evils in this world, and he's not going to rely on any fallible human being like Umar and others. So though the conversation was about, part of it was about the covenant of the Prophet, which he signed to the Christian community, protecting them, and Umar followed the suits of the Prophet ﷺ and give these pledges of security and protection to the Christian communities as well. That this monk who was in the conversation ended the conversation with Umar by making it clear to him that a true Christian actually shouldn't seek any protection from anybody else except his Creator. But it's a very interesting document to read, I guess. It's lucky enough I translated to English for English readers to read. And you have the Arabic text also edited in. It's there, if you like to reflect on it. But I agree with you, Professor Raida, the likelihood that he is a Muslim is there because of the formula that you referred to. But might be a Muslim who is quite difficult, I guess, to accept this.
If I just very quickly,
Right.
but I think your guess is probably correct that the author is a Sufi, and the monk or a rahib is different than a bishop or a priest, because a rahib is more into spirituality and connection with the divine, while the bishop has a political dimension of his position. He's also for taking care of the community. And that's maybe true that he wanted, whoever wrote it wanted really also to be critical, it looks like here, for the Christian order as well, because suggesting that, well, these people are seeking protection from a political figure, while they're supposed to seek it from God. And of course, as a head of a community, you can't just really ignore the fact that you are dealing with power. So we have to take it into account.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأصلي وأسلم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. في البداية طبعا نشكر أستاذنا الدكتور إبراهيم على هذه المحاضرة القيمة، ونشكر الأستاذ أحمد على مشاركته لأستاذنا في هذا الأمر، ونشكر أستاذنا الدكتور عماد على إدارته الحكيمة لهذه المحاضرة. وأنا ليس لي سؤال، إنما هو بعض صح التعبير بعض التعليقات البسيطة على الدراسة. أنا أعتقد أن الدراسة الحمد لله متميزة من جهات. الجهة الأولى هي المنهج المختلط الذي استخدم، فهو شمل في بداخله مجموعة من المناهج من خلال العرض، المنهج التاريخي، المنهج الوصفي، المنهج التحليلي، المنهج المقارن، وده في حد ذاته تميز كبير للدراسة. الأمر الثاني هو المدى الزمني الطويل اللي استمرت فيه الدراسة، وهذا يعطي نجاح، يعطي خبرة كبيرة، وهذا ما تم طبعا. الخبرة عند أستاذنا الدكتور إبراهيم لا تأتي من هذه الدراسة، إنما هي ممتدة قبل ذلك. لكن أنا أقصد أن أي نوع من الدراسات بيستمر لفترة كبيرة لمدة 4-5 سنوات، هذا يعطي إنجاز وتطور كبير ويعطي خبرة كبيرة لدى الباحثين. الأمر الثالث هو مستوى النشر وتنوع النشر في مجلات عالمية، بالإضافة إلى بحوث ودراسات وكتاب صدر فيه، وهذا كله نوع من التميز الكبير. التعليق الثاني يتعلق بسيدنا عمر وكتاب سيدنا عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله عنه. تميز الكتاب أتى من جهة، وهو سيدنا عمر بن الخطاب وضع التصور التفصيلي للدين. الدين وضع التصور الإجمالي، لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم. أفعال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أمور كثيرة جدا واضحة ليس موضوعها الاستقصاء الآن، لكن نجاح سيدنا عمر هو وضع الصورة التفصيلية والصورة الكاملة لعلاقة المسلمين بغيرهم من خلال الكتاب المعروف الشهير التاريخي المعروف. والأمر الثاني هو سيدنا عمر أيضا راعى مآلات العلاقة بين المسلمين وغيرهم، وكذلك عدم التفريط في حق الفاتحين الذين قاموا بفتح هذا البلد، واختلاط أخلاق سيدنا عمر بأخلاق الإسلام وتمثيل ودمع ما بين السلطة الدينية والسلطة السياسية في آن واحد. التعليق الأخير بالنسبة لي هو العجب العجاب، إنه هذا التميز الكبير اللي أظهره أستاذنا من خلال هذا الكتاب ومن خلال هذه الدراسات أصبح في الوقت الحالي بعد يعني تأخر المسلمين وانحطاط شأنهم، أصبح هو موضع النزاع وموضع الاتهام بالنسبة للمسلمين. فعلاقة المسلمين بغيرهم اللي بدأها سيدنا عمر وصورها تصويرا دقيقا من خلال هذا الكتاب، ومن خلال كذلك ثم قام الفقهاء وحتى التاريخيين وقواد المسلمين مثل أبو عبيدة وغيرهم والفقهاء قاموا على هذا واشتغلوا عليه كثيرا. المشكلة أن أصبحت علاقة المسلمين بغيرهم كما كانت نقطة مضيئة، أصبحت الآن نقطة سلبية جدا، ليس بسبب عمر إنما بسبب استغلال الكثير استغلال غير المسلمين لبعض النقاط التطبيقية التي تمت في عصور سابقة. وشكرا جزيلا.
Any other questions? Yes. But these will be the last 2 questions, so I think there is something outside?
There is refreshment.
Yeah?
After.
Okay.
There is refreshment.
Okay, lunch.
Okay.
Lunch.
Refreshment
Okay.
will be later.
So, exactly, give them time just to...
Okay, first of all, I would thank Dr. Zein and his colleague as well for this wonderful research. But my concern is about, the first thing is that when we look at this article or the manuscripture in the terms of a relationship between Muslim and non-Muslim, so we don't have any problem because this is not a new Islamic perspective. So it's like Umar, like he use or practice what Islam recommends with that. But my concern is about what type of spiritual advice or spiritual consolation Umar seek from the monks. That is my first concern, what type of spiritual. Because when we say that the spiritual, Umar seek spiritual advice from a monk in general. So sometimes, maybe for some people who will read this article, they don't have like a fixed background in Islam, they can interpret it in a way that which is not going with the Islamic perspective. So what type of scripture, you have to know that. The second thing, did the researcher seek or find the authentication of this manuscript or not? Because it's like how to say, the date of the manuscript they give is like the manuscript was written later on, right? No, in the time of the Caliph Umar. So it was written later on. So which proof, or what is the evidence that proves that this manuscript or this story is a fact story, or it's not a fake story? So we have to know about that. So this is two concerns that I have about this article.
Thank you. Can we take the second question?
Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. I don't have a question, but we were just discussing about the word Sultan. So I was just, I come from South Asia, Pakistan. So on every Friday we listen to the Friday sermon, and there is this famous hadith, and there is lots of discussion about its authenticity, but this hadith is like, a Sultan bil Allahi fil ard. So, I mean, there's this whole, I mean, discussion about the Sultan, and I'm just adding to the discussion about the word Sultan and its connotation. Thank you.
I'll start with the easiest, I guess. Now, yes, I mean, in the Hadith literature, obviously, I mean, Sultan has been used in the political sense of the word. No doubt about it. I mean, the Hadith that you said, and some other Hadiths also as well, would use the word Sultan, referring to the political authority of the Muslim community. That's true. But whoever actually studied the documents of early Islam would never actually find this word being used as a political title for the Khalifa of the ruler. Yeah. I mean, the terms that we all know, Imam, Amir, Amir al-Mu'mineen, or Khalifa, but not Sultan. It's a kind of a later development, as Dr. Luay rightly said. I mean, it's a later development where the term Sultan designated for the political leader of the community. But as you rightly also brought to our attention, is in the Hadith literature a reference to political authority and the usage of the term Sultan as well. Now, with regard to what you said, Umar seeking spiritual guidance, in the conversation, I mean, Umar is asking the Rahib about certain issues, certain spiritual issues. And the Rahib was giving his answer, and Umar was accepting his answer because his answer was in line with Islamic spirituality. You have to know, even in our literal sources, in the Hilyatul Awliya, Umar is depicted there as one of the Sufi figures of early Islam. And if you read the biography which was presented there, it's very interesting to know that Umar is somebody who's a spiritual seeker as well as a political leader of the community. So that spiritual dimension of Umar been depicted by the author of Hilyat al-Awliya when he discussed the case of Umar ibn Khattab, and he had quite a number of utterances by Umar ibn Khattab and some people describing him during the time of Umar ibn Khattab. Of course, I mean, as we said, the encounter is legendary. But it does have basis, I guess, in the history. It does have some basis in the history. I mean, the historical Umar, it does have. Undoubtedly, I mean, if you read in our sources how Umar has been depicted, but it does have some basis. But I mean, mainstream Muslims will say, well, how come Umar is seeking spiritual guidance from a non-Muslim? Might be brought into the discussion as فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون. Maybe Umar, this ahistorical Umar or trans-historical Umar, was guided by this injunction of the Quran. Maybe. But still, mainstream Muslims might not find it appropriate. But in any case, nobody actually claims that this is a historical account. Even the man himself who wrote this obviously was not making it a historical account because we don't know the monk. We don't know the place where this conversation did take place. It seems, I mean, the conversation is a kind of a trans-historical conversation between this monk and a historical figure who's Umar ibn Khattab, bringing with him Ali ibn Abi Talib. But as Dr. Luay brought into the discussion a very important thing, it reflects, if we identify that this is the 4th century document, it reflects the sensibility of the Christian-Muslim relations during the 4th century of Islam. How the Christians actually viewed the political leaders of Islam at their time and throughout the history of Islam as well. As Dr. Imam has this very important pamphlet, Through Their Eyes.
Yes.
One of your books,
Yes.
So it's actually now the whole thing, if the author is a Christian, I mean, so through his eye, or their eyes, we understand how they view the political Islamic system and their relationship with that political sensibility. But I just would like to tell you this. From all the things which were there, what we were interested in, the term covenant and the Sulh agreements. That was the main focus of our discussion. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll conclude, but I've always been fascinated by the great scholarly modesty by which these documents are analyzed and viewed. And I think no absolute claims have been made about these documents, which, again, a reflection of the objectivity in terms of methodology. And as Dr. Jamal said, they are subjected to really rigorous and complex methodology that combines the description, the analysis, and the comparison, which give, of course, this methodology gives, of course, these documents some kind of, like value and in terms of our perception. And the bottom line is whether we, argue about these, which is good, but in terms of practice, they all agree, and the practice or the objective of the content of these documents is well ingrained throughout the centuries in terms of the interaction between Muslims and non-Muslims and the admission or recognition of pluralism, which is very good. At that time, 1400 years ago, the recognition of pluralism in religion and in sects and so on, which attests to the tolerance, of course, of the Islamic message as a final message. Please join me in thanking Dr. Zein and, of course, Ahmed Al-Wakil. And as always, really fascinating, and we thank you so much for